Welcome back to part 3 of this lowdown on mooting. Just to give a bit of a recap, in part 1 I talked about, so you get the scenario, you read through it, understand it clearly, know what side you're arguing, what court you are before, identifying the key facts, doing your research, looking at similar cases, looking at legislative provisions, etc. And then developing your skeleton, making sure you've got some clear points across, and also thinking about the timing element as well. In part 2, I talked about, okay, so you've done your skeleton, and now you need to develop your bundle, and then also you need to prepare your oral arguments as well. Part 3, I'm talking about the moot itself, the big day itself, when you've actually got to present your arguments orally before the judge or judges. And this obviously is the most daunting part, because obviously it's public speaking, you'll be in front of people, be in front of a judge. I know even in the final round of the human rights law moot, they did invite other people, just anyone to come along and sit in on the final round, but it's obviously the most important part. You've done all the preparation, you've done all what you can do, you've prepared your arguments, you've tried to identify any weaknesses and any defences to those, and you've hopefully seen the skeleton of your opposing counsel, and you've been able to start pick holes in that, and so you come to the moot itself. Now, like I mentioned in previous parts, quite often the moot will be timed, so the human rights law was 15 minutes to present our arguments, and so it's important that you are acknowledging the time, but obviously in a professional way. Don't go, oh, because I'm sorry, I'm running out of time, during your points. Don't say that, because that sounds quite unprofessional, but obviously just bear in mind the time, and as you bear in mind the time when you're going for your arguments. If you're spending, let's say you've got 15 minutes, you spend 10 minutes on your first submission, you've still got 2 more to present. You probably spend a bit too long in that first submission. Quite often, I know that if the human rights law, the person who's doing it might, tap when you've got a minute left, or double tap when you run out of time. They might have a clock or alarm on or whatever, but it'll be really up to you to manage your time and to make sure that you're getting your points across in the allotted time. Like I mentioned, obviously this is about presenting your arguments before the judge, orally present so it's not about what you've written, it's about what you say, how you say it, how you present your points. And one of the key things to remember is engagement with the judge. And I think I mentioned in the last one about the risk of you just having like a long speech or just reading from it. And the risk of that is you don't engage with the judge because A, your eyes are not on the judge because your eyes are reading from the paper, and B, it just is a disconnect there because you might have a bundle or sheet of paper in front of you and the judge. So it's important to have that eye contact and that engagement with the judge or judges. Of course, you might need to refer to your points. That's fine, but make sure you're engaging with the judge and making sure that you are keeping eye contact with the judge. One of the things they did point out after the second round was we would read because I had put on the top, this is just my what I used to prepare for my oral arguments, is I had at the top the opening line, because normally obviously the formality would be like you would say, if it pleases your ladyship or lordship, I am so and so, and I will be continuing the case for the respondent if I'm the junior, or I'll be starting the case for the respondent if I'm the senior, etc. And one of the things that the judge did point out is you don't need to read your name out, which makes obvious sense. He did say that those first 30 seconds are crucial, because obviously you want to get immediate engagement with the judge, and it helps to build that rapport as well, and that's going to be important when you need to guide the judge through your points as well. So it's important that you're engaging with the judge. One of the ways you can effectively engage with the judge is by guiding them through your points, and this is what was so important when I explained in the last part about having structured and clear and well coherent and put together bundle and skeleton, because the judges need to be able to work through it. They can read it up, but you need to guide them through it as well. So when you are about to go on to talk about a case, you will say, if I can take your lordship, your ladyship, to the case of El Haski, for example, you will find this in tab 2 where it is marked 1. And this is at paragraphs 82 to 83, for example. You need to guide the judge or judges through what you are arguing, and that makes it easier. Make sure that you are, when you're presenting your points, you're not going blah, 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 like really fast, and the judge can't keep up. If you're trying to present a point and the judge is still flicking through, working out what they need to do, where they are, where is this case, where is this point, where is this paragraph, and then you might be going a bit too fast. So it's important to be at an appropriate pace. Certainly when I'm nervous, I can speak really fast, or because you want to get over with, or you just want to you're just worried about making mistakes, etc. But it's important to take that calm pace through it to help the judge through it and help the judge know your points as well. Because if you're speaking too fast, the judge might miss a point out. That might be really crucial. So it's speaking at the appropriate pace as well. No one's expecting you to be perfect first time round. You'll make mistakes, but it's important just as you bear some of this general advice in mind. One thing to think about in terms of the actual MOOT itself is interventions by the judge. So for example, if you're about to refer to a case, the judge might say, counsel, could you just remind us of the facts of the case? In that situation, there are a couple of things to remember. Either you can say, if it please your lordship, would you like a summary of the facts? Quite often the judge might say, no, don't need them. Or if they don't know the case, they might say, yes, please. And then obviously you'll provide them the summary of the facts. Or, of course, if they say, could I have a summary of the facts? Then obviously you'll provide them to the judge. And that's why it's so important that you've got a summary and you know the facts of the cases that you're going to refer to. Of course, one of the main ways the judge might intervene is during the point you're making. So you might be saying, it's submitted, blah, 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 blah. And then the judge goes, stops you there and say, can I stop you there? I want to explore this. Or, but surely this would not make sense here. Or, how is this the same as the facts in that case? Or, isn't that not a reason not to follow that case rather than a reason to follow the case? That is a big important moment, but also can be a little bit of a daunting moment, because then obviously you can't really anticipate fully what the judge is going to say if they're going to intervene at all. You can obviously have an idea of some of the weaknesses of your points, the potential weaknesses of your point, and try and anticipate them as much as you can. But ultimately, you can't guess what's going to happen on the day. And so what's important is, first of all, you can pause. If the judge is asking you a question, you can pause, spend a little bit of time. Don't spend it obviously forever, but of course give yourself a little bit of time to think about your answer and then respond. You can ask for clarification. So if you're not sure what a judge meant when they said this, there's nothing wrong with asking, what did you mean by that? In what context? Could you clarify a little bit? A bit. And of course, if even after clarification you're just still not able to provide a response, then you just need to be honest and just say, I'm afraid I can't quite provide a response to that, but X, Y, and Z, or if it's possible, can I move on to my next submission, for example. It's also important not to argue with the judge. If the judge wants an answer or is making a point, it's not really your place to be trying to argue with the judge. You might want to make a point, but you've got to don't spend the time trying to argue for the toss with the judge. Of course, that takes up time as well. So if you're prolonging things by trying to resist and not back down from your point, then obviously that's going to take up time. So it is important to remember that. And again, it's about engaging with the judge and guiding the judge through, but also to have that flexibility as well. So, you might have your submissions nice and neatly laid out, the points that you're going to make. You've prepared your oral arguments. I'm going to talk about this first, I'm going to talk about that, then I'm going to talk about this. But the judge's intervention might throw you off a bit in the sense that you had the structure, but now you've been asked a question that relates to your last submission when you're on your first submission, and you've got to have that flexibility to be able to step out of your structure and talk about the relevant part. And so for example, you might go, well, actually in a way you've anticipated a point I was going to make in submission 3 when I was going to talk about X, but I'll just to briefly talk about here. Essentially the point I will be making is blah 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 in relevance to your question X, Y, Z, if you see what it means. Having just a whole speech might be risky, because then if you try and rigidly stick to the speech, you can't go to the judge, I'm not going to deal with that now, I'll deal with that later. If the judge wants to ask you about a specific thing, they want it dealt then, not later, they want it dealt then. And so it's important that you're able to have a bit of flexibility. Of course, you can return back to your structure, but obviously do that in a way that is trying to be as smooth as you can. But obviously it's important, if the judge is asking you a question, that you answer it if you are able to. And one of the things that you might need to do, especially if you are on the respondent side where you're responding to the appeal, is you might need to make some arguments of rebuttal. These are arguments that you are trying to, essentially what you're trying to do is argue that the points that the appellant made are weak or don't have any ground to them, should be discounted because, and those you'll make your points. One of the things that's quite useful to do for rebuttals is to try and fit them into your points. So for example, you can say, it's our submission that so-and-so is the case. Appellants have already argued, or tried to argue, that, this is the case because, however, we want to rebut that. So it is quite useful to try and weave those points from the appellant or points from the respondent into your main submissions. Even on the appellant, you might say, well, we anticipate the respondents are going to argue so-and-so, but we want to quickly discount that, try and preempt that by saying so-and-so. The way it worked for the human rights law moot, but probably be similar for other moots, is that the senior appellant has a right to reply at the end. That's an opportunity for them to reply to the arguments that have been made by opposing counsel. Obviously, it's an opportunity for them to make some rebuttals, final rebuttals to say basically why the respondent arguments not really founded, and you're not speaking. You'll be making notes of what opposing counsel are saying. So that's quite useful thing to do, because then you want to refer back to it, and when you're making your points, or refer when you're making the final reply, and be able to obviously why they are presenting your points, you'll be thinking about the rebuttals that you're going to make against the points that they're making. There's a lot to think about during the moot. There's a lot to think about in preparing for the moot. But I've hoped in these 3 videos that I've been able to go through in quite a lot of detail. I've tried to go through as much detail. If I've forgotten anything, I apologise. I'm trying to go through as much as I can. But if there's anything that I've missed out, or anything that you're unsure about, or just want to ask about, even if you're just not interested in law whatsoever, but you were just curious about mooting, put them in the comments section below, and I'll try and answer them as soon as I can, the best that I can as well. I hope you have found these videos useful, just something that I've thought about doing for a while, and obviously since the moot, I definitely was thinking about doing it. So I hope you've at the very least found it entertaining, something to watch if you're in self-isolation, for example, due to COVID-19, something useful or something just entertaining or interesting, I hope, to listen to. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to do the usual things like follow me on Facebook and Instagram. You can subscribe to the channel by clicking the bottom right hand corner, share the video, let other people know about it. If you've subscribed, if you haven't, you need to subscribe. If you've subscribed, hit the notification bell to keep up to date. Hope to see you in the next video.